On today's show, the kids just took over and the future of the Capitals showed up early.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm your host, Dan Holmi. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the nice 4-0 victory over the Maple Leafs. And, well, the future is here. We're going deep on the rookie breakout. 4 young players hitting the score sheet in a 4-0 win over the Leafs. And I'm telling you this wasn't just a fun stat. This was a turning point. Why the Capitals may have just accelerated their timeline, whether they plan to or not. Then Stromer ignites the push. Dylan Strome and the core finally stepping up when the pressure is suffocating. Is this team actually making a push, or are we watching the cruelest tease of the season? But where we'll start tonight, a statement shutout win. The Capitals complete a 4-0 shutdown behind Logan Thompson. Was this the best version of the Capitals that we have seen all year? And why did it take until now? Let's go. A nice statement shutout win against, what I'm going to say is not the best version of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think we know that is they are pursuing new leadership on that team, hired a firm to try to take care of that. And, it is what it is. The Capitals needed to win this game and still very much on the outside looking in. But I want to live in the right here, right now. And, oftentimes it's easy to dive into the negativity of its doom or gloom. Let's just live in the moment. It was a nice shutout victory, I guess I'm going to say, over the Toronto Maple Leafs here. So this was the Capitals playing their ideal identity. I've spoke of on the show that this team is lacking an identity this season, and there has been times that has definitely been true. But I guess what is so bittersweet for me is that when this team is truly dialed in, I'm going to say they're one of the best teams in the league. And you might say the best team, one of the best teams in the league. Dan, this team very well might miss the playoffs, and that is true. I can be tough on this team, but I also have to give credit where credit's due. When this team is dialed in and playing as well as they did tonight. Now, not a perfect game. I'm not saying that. Toronto, was controlling paces at points of this game. But the final box score, 4-0, and seeing some of the young kids step up, which I'll talk about later, is what has me feeling really good walking away from this victory. And that ideal identity, what does that mean? Let's drill down on that a little bit. Structured, opportunistic, and backed up by elite goaltending. Because let's make no mistake about it. The Capitals, their odds of making the playoffs are next to none, but they would be next to zero had it not been for what Logan Thompson has meant for this team all season long. And, here's the thing that jumped out immediately. This didn't feel fluky, right? You've watched this team all season, right? And you know the difference between a win, where they hang on, and a win where they control terms. And, this intensity, this version of the Capitals truly sensing the urgency. I like it. Is it too little, too late? Woulda, shoulda, coulda, we'll never know, really. But what it is this team buying in and playing big, on what is truly a huge platform, playing up there in Toronto. But what we saw here, them controlling terms, this was that control. And let's start with, like I said, Logan Thompson. Not just 21 saves, not just a shutout. It is ultimately how he did it. No real second chances. Clean rebound control. calm positioning, no scrambling. The guy's pulse rate looked low, didn't look like he was rattled. And that's one of the things that, I really like about Logan Thompson is he never seems too overwhelmed by the situation. There is, when he allows a goal and he's drinking the water and spitting it out there, but he never seems so frazzled that he can't just totally button it up and get right back into it. Those are the attributes of a great pitcher as well, that, if things don't go your way, you don't totally spin out. And luckily for Logan Thompson, they didn't get out of control as it was a shutout, but kind of just what we've noticed from LT all season long, that even in those situations where maybe, things didn't go his way, he has been one of the biggest reasons why the Capitals have been in these games, many of these games that maybe they shouldn't have been. So what a great showing by Logan Thompson tonight. And that's one of the positive things I'm going to walk away from this season. But what we did see, tracking the puck very well, shutting down in tight chances. And if the Capitals somehow, some way make it into the playoffs, that is that playoff style goaltending that we need. But here's where things get interesting. The Maple Leafs, like I said, it was a shutout. So, of course, a great game, right? The Leafs actually had stretches where they controlled possessions. They pushed the pace. They had zone time. But the difference in tonight's version of the Capitals is the Capitals didn't break. And, you think to yourself, well, Toronto, they don't have a whole lot to play for. Listen, there is no city, I'm going to say, as far as an NHL team is concerned, that loves their team as much as the Toronto Maple Leafs. The team hasn't won a Stanley Cup since like the 1960s, but don't tell them they love their team. And what I'm trying to say here is they're out of it. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. They're out of it, but still playing for pride. Just being a Maple Leaf, right? At the end of the day, playing for futures, that kind of thing. So, again, another team that their season didn't go in their direction, but kind of like what we saw against the Rangers, that the Toronto Maple Leafs would have loved nothing more than to play spoiler for the Capitals, a team that is still technically in it, even though remotely, they would have loved to do just that. But like I say, Toronto had stretches where they looked good. The Capitals didn't break, and that's been the issue all year. This team breaks under pressure, defensive lapses, bad clears, coverage breakdowns, but not tonight. Can we put some of this in a bottle and save it for the Pittsburgh games this weekend? That is my hope anyway, right? And I would have it no other way, really. Elimination style hockey against the Penguins this weekend. I'm loving it. So instead, they layered the game. Early strike from Strome, who I'll talk about in the second segment. Coming up here, transition execution. Timely finish from Ryan Leonard, who is having a breakout season. This is, as a matter of fact, the Ryan Leonard that we knew that was always in there, just, kind of got off to a slow start last year and even this year for the most part, but is just really finding his stride. And defensive structure holding firm. And here's the deeper layer, though. This matters. They didn't chase offense. They waited for it. And I think that is something the Capitals have been guilty for at times this year, is chasing it. It is sometimes slowing down the game to your level, dictate the pace of the games. That's what the Capitals did. That is maturity. That's system buy-in. That is a team finally understanding how it needs to play to win. Again, if it's unfortunate that there's only now 3 games left this season, but it is what it is. Now, let's be real here for a second. What has this been? Because if you get this version of the Capitals, even 5 games earlier, right? That's the bittersweet part, that you kind of walk from like, oh, I don't want to be a revisionist and say woulda, shoulda, coulda, why didn't we do this or that? But it is hard for me as a Capitals fan at the end of the day that why didn't we see this 5 games earlier? We're not talking about a Hail Mary playoff scenario. We're talking about positioning. And instead, now it feels like they figured it out with the clock basically at 0. that even if the Capitals win every single game for the remainder of this regular season, it's all still being determined on the teams that are playing around them and still very much on the outside looking in. Not impossible. It's not impossible until mathematically it is impossible. But that's where we're at. So to wrap up segment one here, this was the blueprint, but the timing is what makes it frustrating for Dan. The Capitals prove they can play winning hockey, just maybe too late. All right, so coming up here next, the guys driving this surge and whether you can actually trust it. Straight ahead, right here. Spring is a natural reset point, and if there's one thing that can quietly cost businesses money, it's messy communication. Missed calls, scattered texts, and no clear thread of who said what. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communication. Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2 with over 3,000 reviews, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses. It lets your entire team share one business number so you never miss a call, text, or opportunity. And that is the thing that I absolutely loved about Quo. Communication at my job was a mess until we added Quo. And the part that I absolutely love, everything lives in one clean thread, calls, texts, and voicemails. The whole team sees the conversation so nothing falls through the cracks. Make this the season that no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedonnhl. That is QUO.com/lockedonnhl. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a really cool stat. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with me and other listeners of this show. Go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. One more time, lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. The thing I love it about the most is you get an ad-free version of this show 5 days a week for only $5. So much to love. lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. As always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So segment 2 here, talking about Strome is peaking under pressure and dragging the Capitals offense with him. Now, you talk about Strome, not having the season, maybe that he had hoped. It's been an okay season, but I think that ultimately he was probably hoping more. 19 goals on the season, nothing to sneeze at. But I think that he was ultimately hoping that he would have more goals at the end of the day. But the 3 stars of this game, LT, Dylan Strome, and Marty Faravari. Dylan Strome is the one that kicked it all off with an assist from Anthony Beauvillier. Good for, like I said, his 19th goal of the season. And I still marvel at the fact of how the Capitals got Strome in the first place, kind of put on the scrap heap by the Chicago Blackhawks. And the Capitals said, thank you very much. I think we found our next first line center. So let's talk about him here. And talking about Strome, because this isn't just a good game by him. This is a trend shift, because he comes into this one with only 2 goals since January 22nd. That's kind of what I'm talking about here, right? That 19 goals, not too bad, but it has been a bit ice cold, invisible stretches. And now, well, what have we seen? Goal on a high skill one-timer, another assist, driving offense, playing with urgency. Again, I don't want to think about too much. Why did the team figure it out so late? It's just good that it arrived, because that first goal, don't overlook it. 2-on-1 rush, no hesitation, absolutely buries it. And what is that? That's confidence. That's a guy deciding, I'm not deferring anymore. And that, my friends, is what we need to see from the Capitals. A shoot first mentality, and take that pass first mentality and throw it in the trash, right? That's where we're at. And here's the stat from this game that matters to me the most: 1 goal away from 5 straight 20-goal seasons, 3 points from 4 straight 60-point campaigns. That this guy has it. This guy that is a stats nerd. He likes to spend his time on Hockey DB and talk to players like, hey, you play good against this team, and you have this many goals on the season. That it's kind of cool, if you ask me, to see an active player so into kind of hockey nerdy stuff, if you know what I mean. But talking about what we've seen from him, it's not streaky. It's dependable production. And I understand that it's been a bit since he scored a goal, on a regular basis. But, when he's engaged, he is really great. Now, layer in the supporting cast that Strome was good for sure, but Tom Wilson extending his point streak, playing physical and facilitating offense. That Tom Wilson, you can sing the praises of him all day long. Physical player, goal scorer, leader, all of those things. Check, 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 check. There's little I ever have to say about Tom Wilson in a negative way. Sometimes maybe he lets his temper boil over a little bit too much. But in any event, he is legit. Ryan Leonard, like I said, aging, in the NHL like a fine wine, continues to score, now leading the team in goals since March. Wow, that's pretty cool to see him really ramping up. It really gets me excited about the future, which I'll talk about in segment 3. And Leonard's goal, that is a moment, my friends, out of the penalty box, immediate impact, breakaway, bar down. That is the guy that we were hoping for. And make no mistake about it, that's not luck. That is instinct. And Wilson feeding him. I mean, that is what we love. That is that true hockey sense. And if you think that looks easy, put on a pair of skates and go out and do it. It's really not that easy. It looks easy sitting on your couch watching it, but go ahead and try it. It is not that easy. But Wilson feeding him, Leonard driving for that goal, that's kind of like one of those highlight reel ones for me. And that is chemistry forming in real time. That's, like, let's put aside what this team is this year. That is something to build on in years to come. And that chemistry is what is exciting, because here's where I push back, because I have to. Why now? Why does this version of the top 6 show up when the margin for error is gone? Because if Strome is playing like this earlier, if Wilson is producing like this consistently, and if Leonard's elevated sooner, we're not talking about these mathematical chances. We're talking about control of destiny. And that is the tension in this segment and kind of the undertone of this entire podcast, this episode. The version of the Capitals, dangerous, but the sampler size is very tiny, because, I like to get caught up in the highs, right? And I'm riding a high right now because that was a nice victory and we saw the youth and all this. But, I still, in the back of my mind, never forget, what we saw here recently against the Rangers. And that is, I think, the biggest part of that Capitals fans are concerned about, that if they make it into the playoffs, which version is going to show up, right? Is it going to be the version that we saw tonight? Is it going to be the version that we saw against the Sabres? Or is it going to be the version that we saw against the New York Rangers? If this could have been sustainable all season long, then I think obviously we'd be in a lot better position. So to wrap up this segment here, Strome and the core are finally delivering like a playoff team. But, and there's always a but, the late timing makes it hard to fully buy in. All right, so next up here, the part of this game that might matter more than anything else, I'll discuss straight ahead. The NBA playoffs are here where every possession matters. Every matchup is magnified and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I like. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The thing I like about it is, in the NBA, I'm already excited, but with FanDuel, it gets me so excited. The app makes it so easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, I'm loving it. The extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and in key moments. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. And if you're on Instagram, you can find us there, Locked On Capitals. So in segment 3 here, the thing that has me the most excited, the win I'm feeling good about, but it is a peek into the future. And I'm here to tell you the future is bright. What did we have? A very first tonight, the first game in the NHL for Ilya Protas. And I'm here to tell you, I liked it. Gets an assist in his first game. You saw him, and I'll talk about here in a bit, playing on a line with his big brother. And there's so much to be excited about for the future, because that's where I'm at now. Assessment, and what is this team going to look like in the fall? That is where I'm currently at right now. So let's talk about what has me feeling optimistic about the future here in the final segment of today's show, because the future is here. It's no more like it's going to be good in a few years and 3, 4, no, it's here right now. We have Ryan Leonard on this team. Cole Hutson joined this team. Ilya Protas joined this team. Justin Sourdif looks really good. Connor McMichael is finding his way. That it has me very excited, if you can't tell, about the future. And I really think that Ilya Protas, it's game 1, right? Let's not get too crazy. I don't want to tell someone I love him on the first date here. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that, if I like it, and I think that he's a part of the future. And I think he very well may have played his last AHL game. I think next season, it is going to be Ilya Protas on this team right out of the gate, because the Capitals rebuild or retool is no longer theoretical. It is happening, my friends, in real time. And this is the story, not the shutout, not the standings. This, all 4 rookies hit the score sheet. Here's where you want to kind of just underline, boldface type, all of those things, and just really let this soak in, because there's a lot of negativity, but this is what gets me going here. Ryan Leonard continues his scoring surge. Cole Hutson finishes with confidence. Ilya Protas, first NHL point in his debut, and Justin Sourdif, far exceeding any of our expectations, right? That when we found out that the Capitals gave up 2 draft picks for Justin Sourdif, you're like, wait, who? A guy that was penciled in to be a winger and started the season on the 4th line and filled in nearly flawlessly when given a lot more responsibility in PLD's absence, that this team is for real and is going to be huge in years to come. But when we talk about what we saw tonight with Leonard, Hutson, Protas, Sourdif, that is not development. It has arrived. The future is here. Because let's zoom in on Ilya here for a moment, because this is where it gets really interesting. In his first game, 15:37 time on ice. Physical presence, face-off 6 for 14, power play usage, immediate chemistry, check, check, check. High five, Caps fans out there. This is it. This isn't pontificating. This isn't thinking about if he's going to be good. I think that Ilya Protas is the real deal. And he's thrown onto the massive line with his brother, and Tom Wilson, a combined, get this, 700 pounds. Are we talking about a line in hockey, or are we talking about a line in the NFL? I'm not entirely sure. And that's not just a fun stat. That is identity. That line didn't just exist. It exposed itself. Heavy, hard to play against, cycling, creating. And then the moment late in the game, calm play, finds his brother, puck moves to Cole Hutson, goal. First NHL point, and we're here. The next era is here. If Ovechkin, and that's a conversation I had earlier on the afternoon show, says that it's over, that it's okay, right? We'll miss Alex Ovechkin, make no mistake about it, but I think that we are in a good position regardless. If he comes back, even that much better. But if he doesn't, I am feeling optimistic about the future, because first NHL point for him, that's not something that always happens. Storybook. But here's the deeper takeaway, right? For years and years, the Capitals have been stuck in between. Seems like forever in a lot of ways. Aging core, still productive. Prospects not quite ready, and no clear transition point. That for many years, they went with the sure thing. And what is the sure thing, my friends, is the veterans, and especially I think back to before Carbs got here with the Peter Laviolette, the reluctance to trust the youth, and then kind of ushered in this whole new age once Carberry came here. And I think the perfect storm, right? And I think that that's why you're seeing this influx, that, a lot of the players are aging out, retiring, moving on, etc. We're here because now Leonard looks like a legit scorer. It's not, projection. It's real. Hutson is contributing. Protas, Ilya is NHL ready, and Sourdif is involved. And suddenly you're not waiting anymore. You're integrating. And that is the wild part. This might actually extend the window, because if these young guys hit while Alex Ovechkin and Wilson are still producing, say Ovi does come back next year. I mean, hell, who knows? It's Ovi. I don't know what's going on in his head. I have my feeling, of course, that he's going to retire, but ultimately only Ovi knows what he's going to do. You're not rebuilding. You're reloading on the fly. That, and I think that's got to be encouraging, especially for, the people that are in the camp that Ovechkin comes back for another year. That if he's like, wow, guys, this looks pretty good to me, that I see pro. I see not little pro. I see Protas and big pro. And I see Cole Hutson and, these different players. Maybe I should come back, right? I don't know if it's going to be enough to push him in that direction. But it's an intriguing storyline for me to follow. And, like I say, for the people that are in the camp that want Alex Ovechkin to come back, then I think that is encouraging. So to wrap up this segment here, the rookies didn't just contribute. They changed the entire conversation. The Capitals' future isn't, something that we have to wait on forever. And trust me, it's going to even get better than what I'm already speaking when you talk about Crystal and the pipeline is jam-packed. It's already here. So final thought on this show, the Capitals may be running out of time in the standings. And I think that we're all in acceptance of that. I'm not loving it, but it's like, okay, I have a major car repair on it. It's going to be expensive. I don't love it, but it's going to be a better car when it's all said and done, right? So let's just, I don't want to think about the money. Just take care of it so it's better. Kind of the same way. But they might have just found something bigger, right? And that is what it gets my Capitals juice flowing, a path forward that doesn't require tearing it all down. Because remember, that was the story. That once Alex Ovechkin retires, it's tear it down to the studs and restart. Maybe doesn't need to be that severe. Retool, right? It's semantical statements at the end of the day. And if that's real, then this 4-0 win wasn't just a game. It was a turning point, my Capitals friends. And that is ultimately what has me feeling good. And I know there are days, and you listen to the podcast, that it is very frustrating, and you hear me vent on the show. But in that same realm, I am equally excited, even more so, I guess I'm going to say, about the future, because it's, I was a little bit reluctant to see how good this would all shake out, but I am pleasantly surprised and exceedingly optimistic about the future. And as Capitals fans, I think you should be super excited about the youth movement that's already here. All right, listen, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You, my friends, are what makes this show so successful. Now, join me, the Everydayer Club, built just for you. Get ad-free episodes of this show, get access to the members-only Discord, and there's a whole lot more if you opt into different things. Subtext, we can actually text back and forth, even if it's the off-season, about the Capitals, like who do you think they're going to get in free agency, those kind of things. I get texts on my phone from the Everydayers every day, all day long, and I love talking to each and every one of you. You can join me. Join us all together. LockedOnCapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. For those of you on the video side, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel on audio. Make your second listen NHL game night on Locked On NHL. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi, and I'll talk to you again next time.